Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Peter Joe podcast. I'm Peter Joe. I'm sitting here in a hoodie. It's freaking really cold in Myrtle Beach right now, surprisingly. I missed you guys. It's been, a day since I recorded an episode? But I'm trying to get all these episodes out there for you. I'm working my ass off. I'm writing, recording, multiple takes. Just want to get all this out here for you guys. I want to entertain you guys. It's the usual. All right, so anyways, today we're on episode 6. Today I want to talk about my favorite video games from each system. I'm only going to talk about video game systems that I owned, which is still a lot. So this is going to be a 2-part series. So today is just going to be part 1. Video games are probably one of my favorite things to talk about. Definitely one of my favorite things to do. One of my favorite hobbies. So I originally, when I was 7 years old, I got a regular Nintendo system, what us gamers call an NES, Nintendo Entertainment System. The year was 1991. Christ, I feel fucking old saying that, but yeah, so it all started in 1991. Video games were well known back in the early 90s, but they weren't blown up like they are nowadays. Like, everybody has and plays video games now. You could be 10 years old, you could be 50, you could be 30. Like, everybody plays video games now. They're super popular. So little 7-year-old me was in awe of how much fun this game was that I was playing. And the game that I was playing was Super Mario 3. That's still one of my favorite games of all time. My mom saw that I was love-struck. Basically, Mario shot me in the ass with Cupid's arrow, and that love has lasted 32 years. I always tell people around my age that we were so lucky to grow up in the time where video games literally blew the fuck up in front of us. We saw like the evolution of video games. If you're in your like late 30s, early 40s, we got to see games just develop so quickly, and it's just amazingly how realistic they look now, and how smooth they run now. It really just blows my mind. So we got to see those 2D graphics evolve into 3D graphics. We got to see Lara Croft's boobs go from blurry triangles to realistic bouncy chesticles. We went from seeing a side view of like our favorite characters to seeing like a 3D full view of them. Our favorite game heroes like Mario, Sonic, and that oh-so-thick Donkey Kong, and all those 4 beautiful kung fu fighting turtles. We get to see the evolution of those. Video games for me have provided an escape from reality, like a stress reliever. They've given me so many memories, so many epic moments in my life. We could bond with video game characters like we bond with characters from our favorite shows, our favorite movies. And that's really a beautiful thing. So I'm going to start my top games for each system by starting where it started for me, the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES. I think a lot of people started with this system because this was the major system that released at the time. Yes, there was systems before this, but this was like, how do you put it? This was like the boss at the time of video game systems. So the NES came out in 1983, a year before I was born, and it ran until it was discontinued in 1995. There were plenty of systems before the NES, like I said, but the NES really just took gaming to the next level. So my number 1 game for NES is Super Mario 3. Like I said before, that was the first game I ever played, and I just fell in love with it. So that's why that's my number 1 game for SNES. Not only is it the best NES game in my mind, but it's also my favorite Mario, not named Mario 64. The level design in this one was hands down miles above the first 2 Mario games. It also featured 3 suits that allowed you to fly for the first time in any Mario game. It also featured the fan favorite Tanuki suit, which puts Mario in like a raccoon-looking suit with a little tail. It's the cutest fucking thing. It really is. The game had great level design and replay value. It also featured the same travel map as Super Mario World, a top-up view of the path you had to traverse to beat each world. So yeah, that's my number 1. So my number 2 would be TMNT video game, which means, for most people know this as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle video game. This is probably the fucking toughest game I've ever played, I think, to this day. I don't know, maybe because I was a kid it was just tougher. People could comment and chime in on this, but I just feel like it was so difficult. I got to the water level and I couldn't get past it. I gave up on the game. I hate to say it. I don't like to give up, but as a kid, I gave up on the game. The setup was really cool. So in order to get to other levels, you had to drive the TMNT van through the cities. There was a pretty unique set of map designs in this one, but like I said, the one that made the game legendary great and legendarily hard was the underwater map. You had to swim underwater and fix electric outlets, which I don't even fucking know. It makes no sense. You're underwater and the electric is working underwater. So that didn't make sense, but it's a game. Shit was different in the 90s. Yeah, so you had to just fix these electric areas, and you had to swim between electric seaweed and rocks, and you had no room for a mistake. Like, you would just get fucked up by the seaweed over and over. And also, for the levels, there was a timer, and it was a really short timer. I still have nightmares to this day about this game, and mainly this level, but this game gave me such fantastic memories growing up. So number 3 for me is Excitebike. This was my fucking jam. This was my introduction to racing games. It had this cool new feature where you could design your own tracks. You could put up your own ramps in certain places, and you could invite your friends over to try out your maps or your tracks. And it was such a good time. It wasn't even about the racing really for this game. It was about the creation and showing your friend, look what I made. This is fucking cool, isn't it? You got your little buddies like, yeah, that's awesome. Let me try this. Oh, cool. It was just a good game to bond with your friends over. You know what I mean? So that does it for NES. So we're going to move on to the next system that I owned, called the Sega Genesis. And I really love this system. Here, I'm going to play the Sega slogan. This was like on the commercials, if I could get it. Oh, all right. My computer's not going to work with me here.
There is one suggestion that keeps...
No. All right. So whenever you start a system, it would go, Sega. Here, this is it coming up, I think. This was the intro to the system. Sega! I just love that. That was my jam at the time. But yeah, it had this... The Sega Genesis was awesome. It was ahead of its time. It released in 1989. So 6 years after the NES it released. It was the first 16-bit console. The NES was 8-bit, I believe. So the Genesis doubled that. The Genesis at the time of release until 1993 was outselling the SNES, which was the second Super Nintendo, or the second Nintendo system, the Super Nintendo. So it was outselling Nintendo at the time when it released, which is crazy. This is one of my all-time favorite systems. Like I said, it's in my top 5 systems of all time. So my number 1 game for that system, you can still check it out, it's still fantastic to play to this day, is Altered Beast. Don't ask me to explain this game logically. It can't be explained. It was a fucking trippy-ass game. So I'll try to explain it in like a minute or less. So it's a dark side-scroller fighting game. You start as a human, and with each passing level, you morph more and more into what I think is a wolf, but I guess it's just a beast. It's an altered beast. There's a weird voiceover during the game who just shouts out little one-line comments. Like he yells, "Live from your grave," and it's just this creepy voice. Actually, a little tidbit here. My favorite podcast channel, The Last Podcast on the Left, they use that some of the sound effects for their intro from this game, which is kind of cool. There are also demonic gods that you fight at the end of each level. I can't imagine smoking weed and playing this game. Like, you would feel so fucked up because it is just trippy as shit. So number 2 is Streets of Rage 2. This was almost like it was a side scroller, but almost top up at the same time. This follow-up to the first is a part of the trilogy. I don't remember playing the third one. I remember 1 and 2, but 2 is my favorite. That seems to be a trend among video games. Usually the third one is the worst one. But But this was a fun beat 'em up game. It had a banging soundtrack. It had waves upon waves of enemy gangs. You had special moves, or you could pick up fucking various weapons that were laying around throughout the map, like bats. I think there was like glass bottles you could hit your enemy with. This was even more fun as a co-op game. Me and my dad used to play this like crazy. A lot of these games I have memories with my dad, playing with my dad. So that's why they hold a special place in my heart. So the third one is actually a sports game. It's John Madden 93. This game was what got me into football as a kid. This introduced me to the sport of football more than anything. Like so many, I was blown away by the graphics, which is kind of funny to say now because if you go back and watch the gameplay now, it's fucking terrible. The graphics are bad. John Madden was the announcer, and he provided terribly corny one-liners. Like, he would say something like, "Boom, he's on his back." It was just the corniest fucking dialogue. I can tell you now, if you go back and play this game, use a play on offense called the weak flood, and you will score every time. It was just one of those cheat plays that you could use. Another game I played with my father at the time. All right, moving on. We're going to go to 1991. This is when the SNES released. This was the second Nintendo system. SNES stands for Super Nintendo Entertainment System. In the mean gaming streets, we refer to it as Super Nintendo. That's it. It was made by Nintendo as a big fuck you to the popularity of the Sega Genesis. Visually, it was better than the Genesis, and the hardware was also better. It improved the controller from the first NES tenfold. Like, this controller fit in your hand perfect. The SNES controller I would say it's probably my favorite controller of all time. It was that comfortable. And your hand wouldn't get tired from hours of using it. So my top 3 Super Nintendo games. Number 1, I'll start you off with, is Super Mario World. This game just took the first 3 Mario games and combined them into one awesome adventure. I believe this was the first Mario game where you could use Yoshi as a teammate in the game. This game and the next one on my list were staples for SNES. So my number 2 is Donkey Kong Country 1 and 2. There was actually 3 DK Country games released on Super Nintendo, but I don't care to mention the third one. A lot of people, it's probably their least favorite. I don't know. It was kind of lame. But that's just my 2 cents. I had to go with both 1 and 2 because they are equal in my eyes, and both are masterpieces. Sorry, I gotta move my mic a little closer. Both of these games are masterpieces, like I said, so I had to include them both as one. Rolling around as Donkey and Diddy Kong was just pure fun. The game also added a lot of comedy, like the uncle on the porch. He was a lot of fun. Unlike the Mario games, like I said, they added humor to them. That's why I like them too. The graphics of the game still hold up today. I mean, I still think it looks beautiful for its time. Third, Mortal Kombat 3. Oh my fucking God, this game was so much fun. I'm not a big fan of fighting games, but MK3 sits on top of my list as the best fighting game. This had the biggest character roster to date for any fighting game at the time. The fatalities were so badass and fun to pull off, especially if you just beat the piss out of your friend, who now doesn't want to be your friend anymore. The third installment also had finishing moves called Friendships and Babalities. Basically, a friendship, it would be some funny-ass little gesture you would do to your opponent after you beat them. For example, if you were Jax, you would pull out I'm trying to remember what he had. Oh, you'd pull out like a jump rope and start jumping rope as your opponent just lay there dead. Babalities are basically what they sound like. You just turn your opponent into a baby version of themselves, and they would sit there and cry. It's kind of clever. All right, so we're gonna forward ahead to 1995. This is when the first Sony PlayStation system came out. Sony, I believe, before that didn't make any video game systems. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the PlayStation, oh man, so good. The system holds up today and is probably my most played system in my life. This was the mecca of gaming. Everything seemed to change for the better with video games after the PlayStation came out. So my PlayStation top 3, this was a hard one to pick because I love so many of them. So number 1 was going to be the Tomb Raider trilogy. This is my all-time favorite series from any video game. I loved all three. They were all on PlayStation. I was a preteen kid when they released, and man, was I mesmerized by Lara Croft's triangle boobs. The rich maps and areas you discovered in the Tomb Raider games. The games also featured cool puzzles and lots of exploration. The first game set the tone for the next two. My favorite moment in the first game was this fucking T-Rex battle that you had. All you had was two little pistols, and you had to fight a fucking T-Rex. It was a hard fight, but you could kind of glitch it by hiding in the wall. Tomb Raider 2 improved on the first one and let you explore a wider range of places in the world. So basically you start at the Great Wall of China, then you go to Tibet, then you go to Venice, and then you finally end up in England. And what a fucking journey it is. My favorite part of the game by far is driving the boat through London, through like the water areas in London. So Tomb Raider 3 is my favorite of the three, and it's in my top 10 games of all time. This was the first time I can remember a game being a choose-your-own-adventure type of game. So after you beat the first part of the game, it shows you a map, and you can pick out the remaining 3 locations, like which part of the world you want to go to next. I love the desert areas in this game. This game is the first game I think about when I think back on my childhood. I dumped so many hours into this game as a kid. All right, so number 2 for the PlayStation, I'm going to go with Resident Evil 1. I think it was one of the first horror games that I could remember. I think it was the first horror game I played. And man, this was fucking hard too. Like, this was probably the hardest horror game I've ever played. So, you're stuck in this city called Raccoon City, and you're stuck in this mansion. But this mansion, it has such narrow hallways, and there's zombies everywhere. You have limited ammo. You could only save at not printers. They were called like ink stations or printers. I forget what it was. But you had to have an ink ribbon, and you could only save at these spots in the game, and you had to save your ink ribbons. You only got a certain amount of them. And like I said, ammo was limited. Most of the time you're using a fucking knife fighting off zombie dogs. It was just a tough game, but it was so terrifying at the time. So ahead of its time for horror. So my number 3 one, I went back and forth on. I ended up choosing Jet Moto. There was Jet Moto 1, 2. I think there was a third. I mainly played the first 2. But Jet Moto was so cool. Like, it was, you were on like a Sea-Doo. You were doing races on a Sea-Doo, like water ski. And every level had ramps. It was really fun. The tracks were really cool. I played this with my father and my friends a lot, and it was a really fun, competitive racing game. Yeah. So that's the list for PlayStation. So we're going to go on to the next system. This system fucking blew the gaming industry up. Like, this really did. Nintendo 64 was like, a lot of people have this as their favorite system. I think if you interviewed millions of gaming fans, they probably have the system up top or close to it on their list of consoles. On the other hand, I only really like the 3 games I'm going to list. I think it was because the 64 gave me a weird headache when I played it, because the graphics at the time and everything felt blurry. So the Nintendo 64 doubled the bits, basically the graphics of the PS1. This was a huge feat at the time. So my number 1 is the fucking Legend itself, probably the second best gaming series in my opinion. A lot of people have it as their best gaming series. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. This was my favorite Nintendo 64 game, and it was my favorite Zelda game. It was one of the few games I would give a 10 out of 10. It was flawless. This game had a lush, colorful world, had a great story. Link was a great protagonist. It had a great antagonist. The gameplay was phenomenal, just perfect. Like, I can't say any more about it. You have to play it to understand it. Number 2 is The Legend of Zelda again, but Majora's Mask. This was the sequel to Ocarina of Time. The gameplay was the same, but they added a really cool day cycle feature. So basically, the day would start. You would have a time limit for your day, basically, almost like a 24 hours, but it didn't take actually 24 hours. So basically, if you didn't complete your quests or tasks before the time limit for the day, you had to reset to the next day. This feature turned some fans off, but as a fan of tough games, I loved it. The other cool feature was you could turn into other creatures in the game, like a Deku nut you could turn into. This game probably could have just been an expansion pack to Ocarina of Time, but either way, it is another damn near flawless game. And my third, this is a game that probably most people have at number one, is Mario 64. The first 3D Mario ever created. This was another 10 out of 10 perfect game for me. Every level had different stars. You had to do certain puzzles to find them. Each mission would give you a hint, and you had to figure out where the stars were on your own. You would have to collect these stars to open up new paintings in the main castle, and these paintings took you to the world. Like whatever you saw in the picture of the painting is where you went. Once these paintings were unlocked, you'd do a sick-ass backflip into the painting to enter the new worlds. So now we're going to go to, I think this is the last one on the list for part one. Like I said, I'm going to release a part two. So this last one for part one is the Sega Dreamcast. It came out right before the turn of the millennium, 1999. This was a great system, and it was a fucking disaster at the same time. Like, it's such an odd system because it had so many cool features, but it just failed. Nobody wanted to buy it. I don't know why. A lot of people missed out. It might have been the price. It was pretty expensive at the time. This system had amazing graphics that blew away any system before it graphically. It also featured a new thing called the VMU, which is a virtual memory Virtual memory unit, VMU. It was a virtual save card that you inserted in the middle of the controller, and you could bring your save data to your friend's house. So if you're going to Johnny's house, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You go there, you take your card out of the Dreamcast, you put it into his controller, and you could load your game from his console. It was new at the time. It was pretty cool. Now we have big hard drives sitting inside of our systems. The system ultimately bombed in the sales department, and it met a quick demise, but I still love this console. This would end up being Sega's last forte into the consoles. So my number one game, a lot of people never even heard of this game. It's a cult classic to me. It's called Omikron: The Nomad Soul. Most people I've talked to don't even recall this game. It was a weird indie 3D open world, futuristic city setting. David Bowie actually starred in the game. He was one of the main characters. I can't even go into the mess of the story. It's really confusing. It's basically like watching a Christopher Nolan movie. It's just a lot of ins and outs and a lot of detail. But the atmosphere, the gameplay, and the world was just epic. The fighting was pretty good too. So my number two is... I love this game, but it disappointed me because of the ending. Shenmue 1 and 2. So they released a third just a few years back, but it took like 12 years off before it came out. Maybe even more than 12 years. I think it was like 15 years. So Shenmue 1 and 2. The story of both of these games is an ancient Chinese revenge story. Ryo is the main character. He witnesses his father get murdered. So basically, he just goes to seek revenge. He learns kung fu, and he goes to revenge his father's death. In the meantime, this game had so many cool features. It featured chase scenes where you had time pushing of a button. They were basically action scenes like a movie, but if you didn't press the button in time, it would end. You get a job using a forklift on a boat, which I fucking loved. You're just moving around cartons of shit all day. The fighting was revolutionary for an action game. I think, if I recall, the fighting scenes required like button timing too. The writing and the characters were so good that you felt for everyone involved, like you felt like you knew the characters or you were there in the story. This goes for both games. Then 2 leaves you on the fucking cliffhanger. The third Shenmue, like I said, didn't get released until a few years ago. So we're talking 15 to 17 years. They waited to release the third. That was so annoying. I still haven't played 3, like I said, because I'm still pissed that they made us wait so long. But either way, 1 and 2 are amazing games. Cream of the crop. So number 3, this was, I kind of put this in as a joke, but I'll tell you why. So this game is called Seaman. Yes, it's Seaman, spelled Seaman, but it sounds like seaman. The name and the concept is the only reason I like this game. Like I said, it was literally pronounced seaman, like that weird Spider-Man shit that shoots out of you. But the name itself, like I said, it cracks me up. The game was stupid but funny. So the premise of the game, actually I can't even tell you the premise, but I know the fish had faces of men. So men with square faces. I can't tell you more about the game because I only love it because of its name. But I thought that was a funny way to end this fucking game called Seaman. Well, this concludes part 1 of this 2-part series for my favorite games for each system. Like I said, I'm only listing systems that I had because there were so many systems released since 1967, I believe. That's when they started making video game systems. Hopefully I can get part 2 out for you sooner than later. I spent a lot of time researching and fact-checking because, like I said, most of these games I played years ago when I was either a child or a teen. I really hope you enjoyed listening to this part 1. I know I enjoyed discussing it with you. So until next time, you know how it goes. Follow me on Spotify. Follow me on Podbean. Like, comment. I got to start linking my email, but you could direct email me to josephplennox@gmail.com. Until next time, you know how it goes. Stay positive, stay hopeful, stay positively hopeful. All right. Love you guys. Goodbye.